Welcome everyone. As you're logging in and filing in, we're just giving people a moment to step into the room, and then our CEO, John Fink, will kick us off. Okay, once again, welcome everyone, and our CEO, John, will get us started.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm so happy you have joined us for this second of three ALICE conversation series. My name is John Fink. I'm the president CEO of Aloha United Way. ALICE, as hopefully everybody knows, stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. And we use the term ALICE quite freely, but I'm not sure everybody understands these are working class people who are working. It's an important initiative to improve the economic stability for our vulnerable Hawaii residents. We estimate that when we do our next ALICE survey early in 2022, the number of people in the ALICE situation will have risen from almost 600,000 to perhaps 700,000 and maybe more. That would be half the people in the state of Hawaii. This complex work crosses all sectors and necessitates a collective approach to systemic issues. That's why we're all together today. We invite you to engage with us today by learning more about the ALICE movement and how you can get involved. Again, thank you all for being here today. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce our Vice President of Community Impact at AUW, Lisa Kimura. Lisa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, John. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our guests for attending here today. As we have people filing in still, just wanted to give you a couple of little reminders. First of all, this presentation is being recorded. Our audience members are not being recorded, just our panelists. And you will be able to view this later as well as share with others. We do have a feature for anyone with any kind of need. We do have a live transcript function that's located at the bottom of your screen. It can show the subtitles for you that are being transcribed live. If you want to take it off or if that's distracting to you, simply click on the live transcript button and click hide subtitles. If you are logged in from a mobile phone, unfortunately, you cannot hide those transcript subtitles. But we thank you in advance for being here with us. If you have any questions for our panelists, we will be having a panel at the end of this presentation. We encourage you to please drop those questions into the Q&A box as they come up for you. If you have anything specific that you'd like to ask a panelist or an organization, feel free to address it to them. And again, all of your questions will be taken at the end of the presentation. For now, as people continue to join us, we want to invite you to join us to take a poll right now. We would like to find out what kind of industry that you are working in, and please go ahead and just click to select. It's going to give us a sense of who's here today, let our panelists know the types of interested parties that are with us, and help us to frame our conversation to your particular industry or organization or sector. I'll give you just about 10 more seconds to drop in your answer. Okay. And it does look like by far and away, the most common type of audience member with us today is from the nonprofit industry, 44% of you, but we do have a good showing of individuals from healthcare, government, education, primarily, with some business folks as well. So we are really happy to have you here. Thank you so much. It really helps us to be able to share our work with you. With that said, we are going to kick off our very first presentation. Let's try this one more time without the screen freezing. One second, please. Here we go. All right. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we're talking today about ALICE in the COVID era. And just to bring us up to speed for anyone who doesn't know the basics, ALICE, of course, is not a person. ALICE is an acronym. It stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. These are the individuals that are working very hard in our community, often working multiple jobs, but just simply cannot afford the cost of living here and are one crisis, one emergency away from a serious situation. Prior to COVID, 42% of our population was ALICE and below. These were the individuals that were struggling very hard. And for a family of four, needing to be able to get by with the necessities is equivalent to over $90,000 in income, most wages of which are not meeting the need for people. What we knew, even going into this current time, was the ALICE report showed us that the cost of living is increasing for ALICE households. Worker vulnerability is growing, but wages have stagnated, and the number of ALICE households is on the rise. That was all before COVID hit, which of course has been dramatic, scary, and extremely traumatizing to a lot of individuals who have been focused on just being able to stay housed. You can see—
Sorry, Lisa, we can't see your PowerPoint.
Oh, goodness gracious. Let's try it again. How are we doing now?
Good to go.
Okay, apologies for the technical difficulties on this today. But again, our ALICE population, the impact of COVID has been substantial. And what that has shown is from our historic, very low, very stable unemployment rate, we did see that initial major spike as evidenced right away with COVID. Comparatively speaking, Hawaii outpaced the rest of the nation in terms of unemployment claims. And you can see this very clearly here, again, from our relatively stable position to the dramatic spike that we had. And although we are seeing the signs of recovery, we have seen tourism begin to come back very strongly. We currently sit at about 7% statewide unemployment right now, which is still roughly double what we were pre-COVID. Nobody was left unaffected by this. Even those households that were considered very comfortable did not have to worry, have seen an increase in not only decline into ALICE, but also into poverty. The significance with this is after the previous recession, we found that 7% of people that had fallen into ALICE or below never recovered. What we see now again is that 42% pre-COVID is now an estimated 59% of our statewide population, which is equal to about 35,000 additional households that have fallen into ALICE or below. With that said, COVID has exposed really critical shortcomings in our economy and in our healthcare and education systems. These were all identified previously as vulnerable threats in the ALICE report, and now we see exactly how profoundly those households were affected. Our vision for ALICE is to decrease the number of households who are ALICE, reduce the duration of time, that they are Alice and create clear and easily accessed pathways to greater economic prosperity. And this is where you come in. We need people, organizations, and sectors working together to provoke action and create change in ways that matter. But how do we take that vision and reframe it in this pandemic era? First is understanding how disproportionately COVID has impacted vulnerable populations. One is knowing that low-income rural communities and communities of Native Hawaiian ancestry and color are first of all more likely to live and work in communities that lack access to healthcare and nutritious food. As a result of these structural inequalities that lead to poor health, Native Hawaiians, COFA citizens, and immigrants are also more likely to be disproportionately burdened by COVID in Hawaii. Nationwide, we've seen this trend where low to medium wage jobs have been dramatically cut, but the situation is even worse here. Between 30 to 35% of our low to medium wage jobs were lost in the beginning of COVID. And while we're returning to some sense of normalcy, it's been a very slow recovery and we have a long way to go. In terms of the hardest hit industries, full-time employee reductions were down 83% from hotels and down 76% from retail businesses. Food, educational, and other services saw those reductions at more than 50%. What that looks like, especially for those non-essential workers who are working far fewer hours or sometimes none at all, many of them had lacked access to internet and computers, which made it difficult or impossible to work or school from home. The industries where Hawaii employs the most ALICE workers were hit the hardest. And ALICE employees are more likely to work in small businesses, which on average offer lower wages and fewer benefits. Even for our essential workers who continued to work and were typically on site, they kept our infrastructure running. They often were doing this despite having adequate PPE. There were some employers who stepped up and added additional bonuses per hour. However, most of the time that was still not enough to bring ALICE workers to financial stability, and often many of those extra bonus pay options have been removed already. This means that even essential ALICE workers were still struggling and are still struggling paycheck to paycheck. The impact on housing is significant. Nationwide, 16% of adult renters are delinquent on rent. The rate is 23% for Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and multiracial adults. As far as food security, adults who identify as Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, or multiracial were more than twice as likely to report that their household did not get enough to eat. And ALICE seniors are another segment of the population that are incredibly vulnerable. These are the individuals who have had to navigate additional burdens, such as other responsibilities for caregiving, meals, impacting their loneliness and their isolation because of the lack of senior centers or homebound services that they may have once received. The other important thing to know is that 40% of our kupuna are actually ALICE and below, meaning these healthcare crises are hitting them when they may not have very little to any savings at all. Another significant population that's struggling are parents with children. Single father-headed households, over 60% are ALICE, but over 80% of single mother-headed households are ALICE. These are the families that are especially vulnerable. During this past school year, they may have lost access to free or reduced meals at school. Over 25% statewide did not have adequate internet access to school at home. And parents, particularly single parents or parents working multiple jobs, could not stay home, which jeopardized their ability to make income. Childcare was more of a problem and more of an issue than ever before. For those who lost their access to school or childcare options, they were suddenly staying home with parents. But although 79% of employers shifted to remote work, only a certain group of parents were afforded this flexibility. 73% of high-income parents reported working from home, but only 24% of low-income parents did, largely taking unpaid leave or relying on extended family and friends to get by. The effect on the workforce is significant. 32% of employers have seen their employees leave the workforce because of COVID, and 29% have sought out other employment. This is, again, largely due to being able to find childcare for those with parents with children. 58% couldn't find childcare solutions that met their needs. The 26% could not afford childcare. The impact on women is even more disproportionate. Women were more likely to have been laid off or furloughed, declined a new opportunity, or left the workforce altogether. And in fact, coming back to work, fewer women than men were coming back. Now, we are seeing the recovery, and we are seeing that we are about 75% of the index of our economic health as we were before. But this isn't the full picture. Alice families were struggling before, and they have new challenges now. For those who may have significant months of back rent to make up, people who have spent their savings down and have absolutely no cushion and no safety net now, we need to make sure that we are working together to rebuild a stronger, healthier economy for our Alice families. COVID has shown us how vulnerable we all are. Alice households in particular, and therefore all of our communities and businesses when it comes to an emergency. We need to more accurately identify needs so that we can guide better policies and practices to help these families weather the crisis. We invite you to join the movement for Alice, and thank you once again for being here today. Appreciate your time. And with that, I am going to introduce first a very quick response while you have a chance to digest and before we introduce our first speaker today. We want to know, based on that information that you just heard and your experience in this past year and year and a half, have you or someone in your household or a family member been negatively impacted by COVID in any of the following ways? So please select below any or all that you, someone in your household, or a family member has experienced. I'll give you about 5 more seconds to drop your answer in. Just a couple more seconds since votes are still coming through. Okay, and we will close. So as you can see, a large majority of our audience have experienced at least one of these instances. Majority have seen a reduction in salary or wages. We've seen people who have lost employment, been furloughed, or some other consequence of this. Important to note that this is something that affects all of us. And with that said, I would like to turn it over now to our presenter, Beth Keisting from the Hawaii Budget and Policy Center, to share just a little bit more information on this with us. Beth.
How am I doing? Is this
Perfect.
okay, good. So I am very happy to be here today, and my comments are going to amplify and support the things that Lisa has already told you. And I'm going to be comparing some data from the Great Recession that was 2008 through 2010 to what's happened in 1 year of COVID, which for purposes of this discussion is April 2020 through March 2021. And before I do go over some of that, I just need to emphasize again that recessions are always worst for low-income households. They are the ones who are most likely to have their jobs chopped off first. They typically have little in the way of safety net and savings to help them out when that happens. And a problem that some households may face becomes a disaster very quickly when there isn't any money coming in and the bills are piling up. And the COVID recession certainly in many respects was very different and very much worse than the Great Recession. So I'm going to show you some of the data comparing the two. First, the effect on unemployment and job loss. During the Great Recession, in a 3-year period, unemployment and job loss was far less. And you know, any of us who lived through the Great Recession know that it was not a happy time. It was really very hard. But most of the time, recessions are kind of in slow motion. They start slowly, they go away slowly, but people have an opportunity to change and try to adjust. During the COVID pandemic, obviously that was that's not the case. And as you can see, many people, many more than during the Great Recession, filed for unemployment, and many more jobs were lost. Fortunately, they are beginning to return, but we still are seeing about 85,000 fewer jobs in our economy now compared to 2000 in January 2020. So unemployment by wage group. During the Great Recession, there was a little more equity in terms of who lost their jobs. And part of that was because the Great Recession took place during a down cycle in construction. And construction workers usually make more than median wage. So there was a disproportionate number of people who were economically affected by the Great Recession. But during the pandemic recession, the vast majority of people were low-income workers. Unemployment by gender was really different too. Again, during the Great Recession, it was a down cycle for people who worked in construction, and that's disproportionately men. So there were more men who were filing for unemployment. The Great Recession, we saw more women filing for unemployment, and part of that is because there is more equity in service jobs between men and women. In fact, women may have a disproportionate share of those jobs in retail and other service industries. Plus the fact that women were more likely to have to take a step back from work because of childcare responsibilities when daycare and schools closed. Unemployment by race and ethnicity, I don't think that there are any surprises here because we know that employment is also not equitable. So unemployment is a reflection of that. During the Great Recession, there was a disproportionate unemployment rate among white and Latino, which seems like kind of a strange grouping to me, but that's the way the Department of Labor does it. Clearly, there was a disproportionate number of Filipino workers who were unemployed during the recession. And I've got a box there that allows you to compare that with the percentages in the total population. So just while you absorb that, I will tell you that about 25% of the population is white, 22% Hawaiian, 15% Filipino, 13% Japanese, 4% Pacific Islander, and 4% Chinese. So clearly, during recessions, you can see that Filipinos and Pacific Islanders were very much affected. Now, besides all the job losses and unemployment, another thing that we are very concerned about, and I know that you are too, is what the effects are on the cost of living. And I'm focusing here on housing because that is by far the largest cost for any household. So we can see the difference in rent increases. So for the Great Recession, those boxes show the increase in rent over a 3-year period. For the COVID-19 recession, it's only 2 years. So I'm comparing the rent in 2021 to 2019. In some cases, this doesn't look terribly dramatic. This is HUD, the Housing and Urban Development data that is the most accessible to measure rent increases. I think that where Honolulu, for instance, has not seen a big increase, we should be looking for big increases soon. Unfortunately, because for one thing, the eviction moratorium is about to expire. You may have seen an article earlier in Civil Beat this week that talked about searches for rental units that were being disproportionately made by people who don't live here, who also tend to have more resources to put into rent. And then also because of what's happening in the house buying market, there is more competition for rental properties from people who might otherwise be buying a house. So it is shocking to see that in that short period of time, the rents escalated so much on Kauai, to a certain extent on Hawaii County. But I think that we can probably see more of the same coming up soon. So let's talk about the housing market. I think everybody knows that it is going into shocking territory. During the Great Recession, you may recall that the recession was caused in part by a housing bubble. And so all across the country, housing values fell. Not so much in Hawaii, but there was a decline in the median price of housing here in Hawaii by only 5%. But for the 1-year COVID recession, you can see that the median home prices have really escalated all over. So that was a lot of data. I do want to return to talk about impact, because of course that's the important thing. The Great Recession will have a tremendous effect on people who have been unemployed. Fortunately, there was the unemployment bump and some money even for people who were contract jobs or self-employed people, but there will be long-term lost earnings. Certainly a loss of advancement and seniority in a lot of jobs that have where people had to leave their employment. And one thing that we sometimes don't think about is the effect on retirement contributions, because of course, you know, when you're working, you can contribute to Social Security, and that affects how much money you'll have when you are able to retire. And in some places, you can also contribute to your pension. Certainly, there is going to be a disproportionate effect on women, I think, who already have income parity issues. They make 82 cents to the dollar that men earn, but also in their economic security moving forward. On children, this is one of the most tragic parts of the entire recession, being out of school for a full year. Or for most of a year for most children. I was recently reading an article that said that in more affluent communities, children lost the equivalent of 4 months of education, but in less affluent communities, that loss is 6 or 7 months. So a lot of inequity there. On the job market, as I noted earlier, we are down about 85,000 jobs right now, and some of those jobs were already disappearing before the pandemic, like in retail, where there is more self-service checkout and things like that. I think some of those jobs are not going to be coming back. I am hoping, though, that the labor shortage from people moving around or making other accommodations might result in higher wages, probably not up to the cost of living, which is about $20 an hour. On housing, certainly, I think that there are going to be very great impacts there with more crowding and displacement. More affluent families may be moving out of the state to see if they have better chances elsewhere. I am hoping that one of the results, though, is more effective demand for change, more effective advocacy, because it's no surprise that we've had a housing crisis for 60 or 70 or 80 years. So this is not anything new. And on health, I do want to emphasize this too, because not only was the pandemic about a disease and that closed everything down, but the people that are most likely to be hurt most by the recession, low-income workers, also were most likely exposed to COVID more than anybody else. Their vaccine status may be less than other people. But economic stress, poor housing, and all of the other things that go with it hurt people's long-term health. And there has been more data coming out recently about the decline in life expectancy for lower income people and people without as much education. So just to wrap up, I do want to talk about investing in Hawaii's future. These are the big themes that I hope we can all embrace and push to the finish line, even though that is a very long-term process for us, because these are all big and important and expensive. So first on my list is housing that meets the needs of people who work here. Our housing market is not meeting those needs at all when houses are being sold to people who are investing or on vacation or whatever. Public preschool is a very important issue because it is the best way to ensure that children get a good start in life, but also it's such an economic burden to families to try to pay for childcare or preschool when it's not available publicly. Post-high school education is also really important. People need to have the kinds of training that will lead to decent jobs over the long run. And then broadband, I think, is one thing that we saw absolutely essential during this time and really contributed more to inequity because it needs to be everywhere, and rural areas don't have it as plentifully as urban areas. And it needs to be affordable. It needs to be basically a utility that everybody has an opportunity to use. It's no longer something that you should only get if you can afford it. So that winds up my presentation, and I will see if I can take myself off of stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beth, for your presentation. We did have one question that came in, if you don't mind answering now, which was the data source for the information that you had, if you could share that. Oh, you're still on mute.
Thanks. The data source for the unemployment information came from the Department of Labor. So that's very readily accessible. The data sources for the housing information for rentals, that came from Housing and Urban Development website, the federal agency. And for the sales prices, I got that from Redfin.
Thank you. Okay, we really appreciate that presentation. For those that have other questions that came up, please drop it into the Q&A box and we will add that to the panel at the end. In the meantime, we wanted to ask a follow-up question based on some of the information you've seen so far. So, which of the following COVID-19 era business policies or practices do you think can have the most positive impact on Alice in the future? So in other words, some of these things that we have already talked about, already explored, and we'll be exploring a little bit more, which of the following do you think could have the most positive impact on Alice in the future? And we'll give you another 30 seconds to respond. You can select all that apply. Give you about 10 more seconds, and any that you think of these policies or practices that have come up during the COVID-19 era that you think could have the most positive impact on Alice in the future. Okay. And with that said, we'll go ahead and share what came up. The vast majority, about 3/4 of you, believe that flexible work hours, meaning flex time for people that might have health appointments or childcare, is a good idea. We have about half of you that believe it's important to increase paid sick leave or paid time off. 57% recommend offering on-site childcare or creating a child-friendly work environment for those with families. 39% believe in increased pay for those essential workers. And about 1/4 of you, 26%, feel that maintaining full-time remote work, eliminating that physical in-person requirement, would be beneficial. Thank you so much for sharing. your thoughts on that. With that said, we're going to go ahead and continue and start to share some of the information from agencies that have been working with us on the ALICE initiative. This has been a 3-year program with nonprofit entities in our community working on programs, services that are designed to help lift ALICE families out of the economic conditions that they are in. First, I would like to introduce you to Kuhio Lewis, the President and CEO of the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. Thanks for being here, Kuhio.
Hi, Lisa. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Kuhio. I'm with the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. We are really excited to have partnered with AUW. It was 3 years ago, actually, so this is pretty timely. Let me share my screen. Okay, so interestingly, 3 years ago, we floated a proposal to Aloha United Way to look at ways in which we could address the ALICE population and look at how we could increase income for households. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our organization and the partnership that we have with AUW, some of the successes that we've seen from it, and then some of the other things that we are working on to support that ALICE population. First of all, the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, our focus really is on Native Hawaiians, but we also support the greater community as well. And that's something that's unique about the way that the direction that our organization is going. We believe that, you know, we're all in this together, and Hawaiians really can be a part of the solution to lift up our community as a whole. So we have been taking on programs that are supporting Native Hawaiians, but also others in our surrounding communities and other ethnic groups. Some of the programs that we offer at CNHA are housed directly or in partnership with some of our members. We have our Hawaiian Trades Academy, which is one of the things I'm going to focus on, which is workforce development. We are a CDFI, so we have a $9 million revolving loan fund to get access, to give community access to capital. We have business development programs, so offering technical assistance, marketing support, back-end support, to help build the capacity of our businesses. We also are HUD certified, so we offer financial literacy, home counseling, and when we have resources, IDA programs as well. So that's matching funds to help stabilize families or help them gain, build up their capital so that they can purchase a home or some other important program. We also are partner with the City and County of Honolulu and the Department of Hawaiian Homelands in administering tens of millions of dollars in emergency assistance relief, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Separately, CNHA does facilitate a policy center, so we advocate on behalf of Native Hawaiians and in partnership with our members at all levels of government. And we are also responsible for the pop-up makeke, which has put millions of dollars into the pockets of small businesses that were impacted by the pandemic as well. We host the annual Native Hawaiian Convention. So this is the largest gathering of Native Hawaiians in the state. And this is an opportunity for them to network, build their capacity, and for us to provide resources to them to build their capacity. So focusing on the Hawaiian Trades Program. So this was just an idea of 3 years ago. When I was working previously at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, I was approached by a retired fire captain, and he had asked me for $2,500 if we would sponsor an initiative of his. And I said, oh, well, what's that? He said, I want to teach the next generation how to become firefighters. And I said, well, what do you need the $2,500 for? He says, I'm going to buy test booklets. I'm going to teach them how to pass that firefighter test. So I gave him the money. I gave him the $2,500 to buy his test booklets. And as a result of that investment, that $2,500 investment, and I was a manager at Aloha at the time, he had successfully helped over 90 people in his surrounding community become firefighters in the Honolulu Fire Department. So I was like, wow, off of $2,500 investment. So I thought, what if we were to take that same model and spread it across other trades? And so when I came to this new job, this new role that I have, I decided to start the Hawaiian Trades Academy. And it focuses on helping those individuals who want to get into trades, because a lot of these trades don't require college education. They just require basic certifications. How do we help them get into these high paying jobs? So that was the birth of the idea of the Hawaiian Trades Academy. So if you look at some of the salaries, right? So police is a trade. You know, when you start off, you're in the $60,000 range. Fire, carpentry, electricians, they make decent money. And again, don't need to go to college to get those nice salaries. So we went to Aloha United Way with a proposal and said, hey, let's work together. Let's help raise income for households by helping them get into these trades. Let's help them pass the test. Let's help them get basic certification so they're more marketable. And that was where it all began. So these programs range from 8 to 12 weeks. They're usually 4 to 5 hours a week. So total investment is about 45 hours on average for any one of these trades programs. And they come with certifications, licensing, financial literacy. There's also cultural classes in there so that they can learn how to be good contributors to our community. They are connected with mentors, provided hands-on experience, and even job placement assistance, so that we help them actually not just learn about the trade, but get into it through the partnerships and the mentorships that we provide. These are some of our graduates. We run a solar program, again, a police program. So these are them on the job, making decent salaries where they weren't previously. We have programs on Oahu, Kauai, Maui, and we tried one on Molokai. And of course, the Molokai program got interesting because of the pandemic. So in addition to it, so the Alice report had just come out, maybe it had been a year, and then the pandemic hit. And so it just made the situation even more interesting. But we had launched the Molokai program, and then the pandemic hit. So we're still planning to go try and see what we can do on that island. But we do have programs on all the other islands, all islands except Hawaii Island. We're working on that one. And even through the pandemic, we've been able to support 86 individuals get through our fire program, or 27 from our police program, 114 through carpentry, and 16 graduates from our solar program. And we are in the process of graduating CDL drivers as well. So that's a new program that we recently introduced. But again, all of these trades focused on raising income for these families. If you want information on how to apply, you can go to our website, hawaiiancouncil.org/trades. There's a number of different trades that you could apply for. We currently have, I believe we have an open application right now for the Kauai police program that we're administering. But I want to emphasize that, you know, in many respects, this was ahead of this. AUW's investment in this program initially it was ahead of the pandemic, which allowed us to help in many ways those that became impacted down the road. So those that have been faced with, you know, having to change a career, for example, hotel worker, or you know, we have a trades program that's available to help them pivot into a new career. There's still work. We're still building the capacity of the program. There's still a lot of need to better track our results, but I can tell you the concept is there. And by way of AUW's investment, we've been able to bring in a lot of other resources and leverage those to further expand our offering. The other program, of course, and we started this out initially with Aloha United Way last year. And anybody that works with government services can tell you that it ain't easy. You know, oftentimes, you know, they work on a reimbursement process. And so for you having to float millions of dollars is no easy calling. But I wanted to emphasize that this program is available to residents right now, especially those, every county has a program, right? 18 years and older, you have to be renting, you have to be under 80% AMI, and you have to have some impact to COVID. But so this is a resource for those that are impacted by COVID. This is where we are this year. So this year we have supported over 5,600, almost 5,700 households. And the average household is 3.5. So that's a lot of individuals that have been supported by way of this. And we've gotten out over $45 million in aid. And you can see, we kind of did a little hotspot thing where you can look at where the aid is going. So it's going pretty much everywhere on the island. So we've been able to get resources out. There's still a lot of need out there. This is not an easy program to administer because of the requirements that come from, they're not requirements that we make, we just have to comply with them, but federal requirements. But this is a resource for those that need stability, that need help. If you're impacted by COVID, I encourage you to apply. We also have a little quiz on our website to see if you qualify for support. You just go to hawaiiancouncil.org/kokua, and you can take the little quiz, and it'll help you determine whether or not you're going to qualify for assistance. So that's the short presentation that I wanted to provide, but just highlighting on some of the things, the takeaways as a nonprofit organization that I've realized was critical during this COVID period, and how we've been able to not just overcome, but really take advantage of the opportunity that this pandemic has presented to nonprofits. I think one of the key takeaways for me is the agility, like the ability to be flexible as an organization. You know, CNHA previously, we were stuck in a certain path that was limited, and when the pandemic came around, we pivoted. We pivoted our organization. We didn't know what tomorrow would look like, and so we shifted to going after services and programs to help people with recovery. And I mention this because, you know, those organizations out there, that ability to pivot and change direction has been key for us in helping families gain access to resources. So that's a takeaway for me is we had to learn how to be flexible. We had to learn how to be more responsive because people were more exacerbated than previous, right? So so customer service was critical. Making sure that we were able to leverage partnerships and resources with other nonprofit agencies. That's been very important too, is collaborating with others that are offering assistance. So having a strong communication with one another, that was a key takeaway for us. But also it takes sheer determination to really help these situations that we are experiencing in the community. So being able to not just be agile and flexible, but really putting your foot on the gas and making sure you do everything absolutely necessary to make it successful. That's another takeaway for me. And that's how the pop-up makeke came. The pop-up makeke came just by way of us wanting to support community and doing whatever it absolutely took to make that happen. Lisa, I saw you turn your camera on. Are you, is that your cue for your time's up? Okay.
I don't want to cut you off, Kuhio. You want to?
No, what I wanted to bring to the table here today in presenting and sharing was, number one, there's resources available. There are investments that have been made by AUW and other funders that are really helping create impact for community through COVID. I encourage you to go to our website to learn about what resources are available. And the other thing is just wisdom from somebody that has learned through the hardships of working with government, is just being able to pivot, to be flexible, has really been supportive and successful for our organization. Anyway, thank you all for allowing me. I'm going to stick around to answer any questions you guys have.
Thank you so much. And for anybody who does have questions, please go ahead. Once again, drop that into the Q&A box and we can take them at the end. Okay, next I'd like to introduce Katie Chen, the President and CEO of Goodwill Hawaii.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thank you to AUW for inviting Goodwill to share a little bit about what they do in the community, especially over this time on the pandemic. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So for Goodwill Hawaii, we have been around for the last 60 years or so. And last year we serviced close to 11,000 people across the state with job training, job education, job counseling, and job placement. And that's what we specialize in. We help people who don't have a job or are looking to increase their livable wage by becoming promoted or changing industries. That's what we've been focused on. Now for Aloha United Way, when we started collaborating with them 3 years ago, we focused on servicing the ALICE population, those people that already had a job but were interested in increasing their education or their training to earn a higher livable wage. So last year, what we found was it was because of the pandemic, it wasn't just about earning a higher livable wage. It now became earning any kind of wage since so many people lost their jobs last year. We had a goal of servicing 100 people last year with job counseling and job placement. We ended up serving 181 people and placing 50 people into jobs with an average income of $16.56 an hour. So previously, almost everyone in the ALICE program was already employed, but because of the unemployment, we saw now 3 out of 4 people were unemployed or had been displaced from their work, such as for. So there's a definite change in the ALICE population. What we tried to do over the pandemic, we had to close our stores. And I know many of you know Goodwill as a thrift store business across the state. We do have 13 stores across the state with shoppers of over 700,000 shoppers a year. And what we decided is that in order to reach out to many people as we could in a very quick period of time, we opened up help desks in our stores to reach out to those 700,000 or so people that come to our stores. And what we found is people came to us not just to help with finding a job or trying to get a promotion. What we found is that those people that the type of help that they needed the most was applying for unemployment, financial aid, and or healthcare. So with our ALICE staff support team, we end up helping nearly 2,000 people with these wraparound services, which were a new type of service that we offered to the community to help people get through the pandemic period. I just wanted to show you a video of one of our clients who came to us as a drop-in service, reached out to our CRED program, which is supported by Aloha United Way over the pandemic. So Genevieve, if you'd like to click on the success story, I'd appreciate it.
You know how you know when you're happy? When you show up to work early. And I show up to work an hour early, 30 minutes early. So I was like, I must like what I'm doing. My name is Alan, and I'm a participant in Goodwill's employment program. You know, I really love the food industry because I love when people are happy with something that I've made. Of people saying, that tastes good. I was working in the kitchen. I was loving life, loving my job, and, you know, training to be a manager was great. And, you know, everything was falling into place until COVID came. We were closed for a few weeks, and, you know, I understood it was okay. And then a few weeks became a few months. So, you know, that was a very challenging time in my life. Luckily, I did have some savings, so that lasted me a while. But eventually, I did have to find some more work. So I went into just odd jobs, just asking people what were they doing to make money during these times. And in life, I have to do something that I love doing. It's so important to me. I had to leave the odd jobs because they weren't my passion. They weren't making me smile. They weren't making me happy. This time off really allowed me to go within and figure out, what I really wanted out of life. Yeah, I just came into the office and I went to the front desk and I said, hey, I need help finding a job. And what I liked about Virginia the most is one of the first things we did before even looking for a job was we did this assessment to see what kind of jobs would be best for me, best for my personality, best for my strengths.
I didn't want to find Alan just any job. I wanted to find him something that would match what he has brought to the table. He's got great energy. He's got a great personality. He's intelligent. He's educated, all of those things. And he's driven to do something that suits his personality. He basically walked in the door and he's like, it's December now. And then he said, I'm going to have a job by the end of December. And he was that sort of forward thinking and that approach. It gave me a little bit of concern because, that's a quick turnaround, but also it gave me a matching energy that, okay, let's go do this. Because at that time, we hadn't seen a whole lot of people walking in with that sort of whatever, gizmo, I don't know what you call it.
Virginia offered so many services to me. One of the main things we first started on was my resume. So she helped me align my resume with, what they were looking for. She offered me tons of different trainings. She offered so many things that I didn't even think about. Shot me hundreds of job offers. I'm like, I can't work at all these places, Virginia, I'm one person. But Virginia was there for me as much as I was there for myself. I was just amazed at, just the effort she put in finding all those jobs for me. I was just like, wow, of course I was doing my own search because ultimately it's my life. I can't put my life into no one else's hands. It's my responsibility. But, just her matching my energy, I was just so grateful for her. I took one step, she took 1,000. She changed my life. Yeah.
Since the pandemic, we've been able to help thousands of people. Part of this last year, we've seen more people not necessarily being able to work, people who've been furloughed and lost work and lost hours at work. So we pivoted into working with people needing other things. So since COVID, everything is online. Just applying online is one thing, creating a resume online and being able to email it. But the next step now is people in COVID need to do interviews on the computer. So we let them come in and they can use the Zoom platform or whatever platform the interview is operating on so that they can actually sit in for the interview to get the job. One of the most important steps.
Eventually a job opportunity did come up with Jamba, and at the time they were doing virtual interviews, and because I didn't have a computer, I had to figure that out. And luckily enough, Virginia offered, hey, you can do your meeting here. She had all the resources. She had the microphone set, she had the laptop, she had the quiet space, and luckily the interview went great. I got the job, but after it wasn't over. I just started the job, but hey, I needed to have all the uniform and equipment to work. So one of the requirements was non-slip shoes. I didn't have non-slip shoes at the time. So Virginia helped me out with that. She actually, went to the store with me, make sure I had a, comfortable pair. Of course, with most new jobs, you have to do training. So we had a lot of online modules that we had to do. At the time, I still didn't have a computer, so Virginia also offered me to come to the Goodwill location so I can do my training. Even after I got employed, Goodwill still continues to help me out, with computer resources, and Virginia continues to tell me that she's just a phone call or an email away.
Working with Alan is revelatory. He's done wonders with showing me the way an ideal job participant could be because he's been so positive about it. And I've really enjoyed that process and was really, surprised and happy and excited that he got the job, and now to see him excelling and being promoted, that's what he deserves.
6 months later, I'm a manager at Jamba, and I'm just so happy to, just be, working at a place I enjoy. Going back to the food industry, it's just back to my passion. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy being in the kitchen. I enjoy talking to customers. I enjoy making their day with, just my smile. If you're not in a job that, you don't like and you're looking for other opportunities, just know they're out there, man. And one of the best choices I'd suggest is Goodwill, just because they have so many resources and they're connected to so many other organizations and so many other programs. And you know, the sky's the limit, and you just have to be brave enough to take that first step.
Oh. Hi, so I'm going to try to share my screen again. Thank you to Alan for letting us share his story with everyone. We're so proud of Alan and all the work he put into to achieve, to get the job that he wanted. And more importantly, he's really proud of himself and to see how far he's come in such a short period. So looking ahead, what are we doing here at Goodwill Hawaii to continue to help people meet the challenges of COVID? We are looking to build on our partnerships to bring more training and job opportunities out to our clients. So I know many of you that are on the call today, you are employers, and if you've got vacancies, we have hundreds of people right now within our programs that are looking for work, and we'd love to be able to match our clients to your jobs. We're going to continue to expand our presence in our stores and start building out what we call job connections, Goodwill connections, like a job center inside the store, so we can easily reach those 700,000 shoppers each year that patronize our stores. And just when they come in for really affordable items, they'll be able to just do a walk-in to get job assistance. And lastly, this was mentioned in the previous presentation, we need to be flexible, and we're going to continue to do that and learn new skills and get new resources so we can best meet the ever-changing needs of the ALICE population. So how can you help? For those of you listening, as we mentioned, please partner with us. We'd love to have your support in connecting people to jobs that they will love and learn from, and help them get back into the workforce. Find other ways to collaborate with us. We are always looking for opportunities to bring the right training and the right education to the workforce development community. If you find you're having difficulty locating people with the right skill set, we've actually collaborated with different, trade academies like that were just mentioned. We've collaborated with also even the community colleges to ensure that the proper classes are out there to meet, to upscale our population here in Hawaii to meet your employment needs. So how do you get a hold of us? You can contact here on the screen Emily Lau, who is our Vice President of Mission Services. Here is her website. You can also get this contact information through Aloha United Way. But feel free to also contact me. My name is Katie Chen, and you can reach me at kchen@highgoodwill.org. So thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to reach out to you and tell us a little bit about what we do.
Thank you so much, Katie. And once again, for anybody who has questions that have come up, please go ahead and drop it into the Q&A box, and we will answer at the panel at the end. Okay, next, would like to introduce Jim Murphy, the Executive Director of Honolulu Habitat for Humanity.
Great, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to not only participate in this conversation with, oh no, I think I'm sharing. I'm trying to share my screen, but now I'm somehow in the middle of my presentation. So I'm gonna go back. Sorry. Well, I'm having some technical issues. Somehow I'm in the middle of my presentation and I can't get back to the start. Well, anyway, my name is Jim Murphy, and I am not in charge of IT. And I am, well, I don't know if I'm sharing my screen or not with you right now, but
We're seeing your screen, Jim. You're on the page with the Honolulu Habitat Affordable Homeownership, the orange box, the 3 boxes.
Oh, really? So you're saying,
Jim, I'm actually sharing the presentation for you. Is that okay?
thank you, I appreciate it. I don't know if you've got the one that has the 2 videos, but if we can't get to the 2 videos, then I can work around it. All right, so my name is Jim Murphy. I'm the executive director of Honolulu Habitat for Humanity. Our mission is essentially, when you talk about affordable housing, it's really broad spectrum of services. We are specifically around home ownership, and home ownership is a very unique opportunity for communities because it ultimately is bringing a strength to communities and to the families that is vitally essential to those communities. People who own homes are more than likely to shop in the communities they live, participate as volunteers in the communities that they live, send their children to school, attend churches in the communities that they live in. So we're trying to create more home ownership opportunities and we are specifically on Oahu. Our families are resilient, they're financially stable, and they're willing to partner. And those are really the 3 core tenets of becoming a partner with Habitat. The journey for families to become a homeowner within our program starts long before it gets to us. This is what we call our pathway to home ownership. And if you look at it, it starts with the family having the audacity to take that first step to say, I want to own my own home. They may have a land lease from DHHL. They may have property that they're sitting on that belongs to, they may have been in their family for generations. Or they may have none of those things. They may just want to get into our queue, and when opportunities come up that we get land from the state, they literally put their name in the hat and potentially get chosen. We take them through the entire process, through the application process, and all of the financial requirements that are necessary to make sure that they're qualified to be a part of our program. There is a mortgage tied to their home. It's a 0 interest mortgage that we provide, but they do have some skin in the game. And so we build our houses at about 40% of what market cost is. And it's a 0% interest that we hold over 30 years. So it's a very good deal, but the house is not given to the family. The family has an obligation to pay the mortgage back. So we want to make sure that as we're getting families qualified, we aren't getting them so excited about the opportunity to own a home that they get themselves into a financial situation where they can't afford it. And then they get approved by the board. And then we start the process of developing that house. We build according to family size. So we don't, if you've got a mom and dad and maybe 2 children, a boy and a girl, they qualify for a 3-bedroom house. That's what we build. We don't build for the potential to grow or even downsize or have other family members there. And that allows us to build more affordably and more efficiently. We do give the opportunity for the families to choose because they're owning a home just like many of us, choose their own flooring, their paint color, their cabinetry, those kinds of things. And for some of these families, this is the only chance they'll ever have to do something like this. And then we start building, which is actually building the house is actually the shortest part of the process. We get hundreds and hundreds, probably around 12 to 1,400 volunteers who come out and build with us for every home. They could be people from the community, people from houses of faith, the military, businesses, you name it. People will come out and build houses with us. And then we do a home dedication at the end of every every build and celebrate what we've all done together. If you want to pivot over to the next slide, you can. So COVID-19, we, like everybody else, had to close down for a certain period of time. We are considered in many respects an essential business because we were doing affordable housing, and our restore in Kalihi is considered a hardware store. So we could have actually stayed open, but we needed to do some safety measures both in our office and restore, and also at the build site. So we had to stop for a while, and unfortunately we had to furlough most of the staff. We furloughed them rather than laid them off because we want to make sure that they kept their benefits and their PTO. And also I worked really hard to get, some of the people to come work here. And I wanted to make sure that when we were able to, we wanted to get them back. We continued to build, but we are still under some restrictions in terms of the number of people that can gather out at our build sites. So that put us behind on a few of our builds that we had active because we could only have so many volunteers out there. But fortunately, one of the programs that one of the aspects of our program that goes overlooked a lot of times is the fact that we hold our mortgages. And so, we work with families as they're making mortgage payments to us. Nobody fell out of the program. Nobody fell out of the queue that was getting ready to build. None of our existing families fell behind. And that's part of the luxury of doing what we do, as opposed to having families who may miss a mortgage payment here or there and getting a different response from a bank than they would from us. But I will say our phone was ringing off the hook, still is, in terms of interest for our housing program, because people were home and they were making improvements to their home, and were looking to either expand or fix things, or looking at the opportunity to potentially better their families' lives with a new home. Go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that we were able to do is make good use of our downtime. We restructured our build program that would reduce the amount of time that it takes us to build a house, doing a blend of contracted labor and volunteer labor. There's lots of things that volunteers love to do. There's lots of things that volunteers don't love to do. They don't like digging foundation. They don't, I don't like volunteers up on the roof. And so we basically chopped our construction program into 4 different phases, and used grant funds to pay for contracted labor, get volunteers in. Obviously, electrical and plumbing is done by contractors, and then we bring volunteers in to finish the house. We finished 3 houses in COVID. And we have 3 more under construction right now. So we didn't stop. We had some really gracious volunteers who came out, a general contractor who came out and volunteered with us. And to be quite honest with you, the fact that we were out there building and getting 3 families into home during COVID was as good for our spirit as you can imagine, because with everything else that was closing down in 2020, we were actually building some houses, and and honestly, it lifted our spirits quite a bit. One of the things that we did find out was, now that we've actually budgeted for 10 builds this year, and in order to do that, we've got to have the money to make those builds happen. And because we're building at a higher pace than we ever have before, we are creating a revolving fund to manage up to 6 builds at a time, making use of grant funds. And so that's kind of a new initiative that we are getting ready to launch as well. We can go to the next one. It's not about the house, it's about the community that builds that house. Our families have and always will be Alice. I will admit that it was an acronym that I was not acutely aware of, and before I started working with Habitat, and certainly before our relationship with this first Alice cohort. But once we took a look at it, we realized that we had been Alice all along. And it was a great opportunity for us to be a part of this group. And I don't know that we realized how much we needed each other until we needed each other during COVID. So it was a really great opportunity to have the support of AUW and Goodwill and CNHA and Hawaii Homeownership and everybody around us. And you know, we're building more than we ever have before. We're just about to launch a strategic plan, which is just going to expand all of the work that we've been doing for almost 34 years since we've been in history. And then the next slide. There's supposed to be 2 really good videos here that unfortunately I can't share with you, but I will say tomorrow, if you want to see me cry in public, please come out to Waimanalo, because we are dedicating a home to Moses Piohia, who has been a volunteer with us and has he's a single dad, 2 daughters and a son, and he's a great community member, and we cannot wait to get this man into his home. He, unfortunately, there was a fire out in Waimanalo a month or so ago. He was renting that house as we were building his new house. So he has endured and persevered beyond anyone that I could ever imagine. So please, if you want to get involved, come out and build with us, share your expertise, or if you know somebody who may need our services, the next slide is my contact information. There you go. Who needs a video?
Thank you so much, Jim. We'll go ahead and post the video online on the Alice event page so people can see it afterwards, and I'm sure they can contact you directly afterwards. We'll make that available for anybody who'd like to see those videos. Next, I'd like to introduce Reina Miyamoto and Dale Tomei from Hawaii Homeownership Center. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Reina Miyamoto. I'm the Executive Director for the Hawaii Home Ownership Center. And Dale Tomei, who's joining me today, and this presentation is our Education Coordinator. So I'm going to kick us off by telling you a little bit about the Hawaii Home Ownership Center. And Dale, we can go to the next slide. The Home Ownership Center is a nonprofit organization, and we were created with the dream of helping more first-time home buyers into home ownership. You know, really about safe and stable homes, making such a huge impact for Hawaii families, and for all the reasons that Jim already talked about, home ownership helping our communities too. So the home ownership was started, and I'm going to talk about some of our programs in the next slide. So how do we help families get into home ownership? You know, we started in 2003 with our home ownership promotion program, and we offer a lifetime membership of services, including post-purchase services. So we start off by offering classes and home ownership coaching to get people into home ownership. And even after they become homeowners, we like to make available post-purchase services, because it's not just getting people into home ownership. We think it's important for them to be able to sustain it as well. So 57% of our graduates have purchased homes so far. A lot of them are still working on that goal. And we found that 70% of those who have bought a home are considered ALICE. So we know firsthand that education and connection to resources, some of which you just heard about today, can make a difference in terms of purchase opportunities, even for our lower income families here in Hawaii. We also created a financial capabilities pilot program, thanks to Aloha United Way, allowing us to kick that off with some seed funding. Dale's going to actually talk a little bit more about that later on. And another program that we have with the Hawaii Homeownership Center is our foreclosure prevention and rental counseling program. We started that in response to the pandemic to make sure that people had the education and support that they needed to navigate some of their housing issues. So next slide, Dale. So while this isn't going to be part of the talk that Dale's going to talk about, it, just to round out our overview of our organization, Hawaii Homeownership Center started 2 nonprofit affiliates. The first is Hhoc Mortgage. Once we started homeownership education after a certain point, we thought, gosh, is there more that we could do for Hawaii families to be able to get into home ownership, in particular our low or moderate income families here in Hawaii. So Hhoc Mortgage was born. It's a nonprofit mortgage broker and lender For those of you who are familiar with the CDFI designation, we're one of those as well, focused on residential financing. So through the grant opportunities that we've had with Hhoc Mortgage, we've started 2 down payment assistance programs to help loan some families into home ownership through a down payment assistance loan, as well as a deferred down payment and closing cost loan too. Next slide, Dale. And our second nonprofit affiliate that Hawaii Home Ownership Center started is HHOC Housing and Land Trust, with the hope and dream of not just creating, but also preserving affordable homes. So it's in its infancy stages. This is one of our families, our very first family that purchased, and a little picture of their kitchen. That was our first unit, and currently we're in escrow to sell our 5th townhome, and we have 1 more listed for sale. So we're looking forward to more purchase opportunities made available to our Alice families too. And from here, I'm going to turn it over to Dale to tell you more about the Homeownership Center.
Thanks, Reina. So how did COVID-19 affect our programs? So all of our in-person sessions, of course, transitioned to virtual options because we're limited due to COVID restrictions. So we all transitioned to webinars, and it was a little different initially because, you know, teaching via a webinar virtually is really different from actually having the interaction in a live in-person session. Even the counseling sessions that we provide as follow-up to the education course went virtual or through phone conversations. So it was a drastic change for our normal services, providing homebuyer education and financial coaching. Due to the pandemic, we started adding rental counseling and foreclosure assistance as far as helping families to understand what their options were. Oftentimes they were already calling us and they were already working with their lenders, but it was so overwhelming as far as understanding what options were truly available to them that they needed a third party that was non-biased to their actual situation to kind of explain what the options were, and then in some instances to give them some reassurance that they were doing the right thing by communicating with their lender. And a surprising result from moving to this virtual presentation was that we found out that the services were actually increasing as far as the reach to many families in the state. So our homebuyer education classes, if you look to the left side of that red line, this was about a year leading up to when we started going under COVID restrictions. That was the enrollment for our homebuyer education classes. And once we went restricted and we went strictly to a virtual application of our homebuyer education course, as well as virtual counseling, our participation rates increased. And what we found that, you know, sometimes it's a convenience not having to drive to a location if you're living on the other side of the island. If you're from a different island, you can join scheduled classes on Oahu. And we actually found that our participation rate increased during COVID and when people were restricted. Now, some of it might be they were furloughed, they were laid off, they have more time, but we did see an increase of our families actually coming to the center for homebuyer education. And even though, you know, the home prices were already starting to go up, and right now it's crazy, there was still interest in preparing themselves financially. Now, the development of our financial capabilities pilot through the ALICE population was, and our goal was to develop a scalable model that would instill positive financial habits of monthly budgeting, understanding their expenses, as well as setting goals for savings. So using our experience and really focusing on money management in our homebuyer education classes, as well as credit, we thought that we'd apply that same type of education and knowledge to our pilot program. Now, to test this model, we intended to impact more families with our existing staff, but to try and incorporate it into a workshop series. So we actually started this pilot just before COVID hit. So we actually had, I guess, kind of a two-way model where we actually held live in-person classes, and then we went to the webinar series. So in effect, it was actually good that we started providing our orientations for the Homeownership Center via webinar. Because once COVID restricted group gatherings, we went strictly to webinars, and we were able to continue offering the workshops via webinars. So the financial capabilities pilot included 2 courses where we would cover the basics of money management through budgeting, savings, as well as understanding credit. And then the participants would be submitting monthly budgets. So they would actually have to track their income, track their expenses on a monthly basis and turn it in. Now, at the same time, they would also have to commit to themselves making a deposit for savings. And the idea was that we would provide them an incentive that if they were able to turn in those 6 consecutive months of budgets and also made a commitment to make a deposit for 6 consecutive months, that the incentive match for their savings would be a 1-to-1 match up to $350. So in that 6-month period, if they saved $200, there was a 1-to-1 match of $200. If they saved $350, we matched it with $350. If they saved $1,000, the maximum match was $350. And ultimately, it was to provide that incentive for something that we kind of already knew that we should be doing on a regular basis anyway. But it's such a challenge for a lot of these families, and not only Alice families, but it's such a challenge to save on a monthly basis just because our cost of living is so expensive. So we thought we'd provide this type of incentive so that they would put into practice things that, again, we already know that we should be doing. Now, with the financial capability participants, and again, partnerships with job training and affordable rental projects, that's how we identified the groups that we'd be working with. There was an average household annual income of $33,281. Interestingly enough, I thought it would be more evenly spread, but there was almost a 2-to-1 percentage of the participants being female. A lot of them, again, single parents. Average age was 43 and a half. Now, some of the outcomes of the families that participated in our financial capabilities program, 52% of the families that started, and mind you, this was when we had that pandemic hit us. So a lot of the families actually dropped off because either they were furloughed, their hours were cut, or maybe straight out laid off. But there was a 52% completion rate of the families that started the program. 72% said that they did not save on a regular basis prior to actually enrolling into the program. And of all the participants, 92% that they would continue to actually save and make a commitment to themselves. 35% of them improved their outlook for the future. And we took a measurement pre as well as post. And these are some of the comments that they received after completing the program. So a lot of them, they mentioned that, because of the pandemic, they really had to talk to their families, talk to their kids. And the kids were actually starting to learn that, you got to make choices on how you spend money and you plan for the future. Others even mentioned that they lost their job or their hours were, really reduced, and yet they were still able to make a commitment to save on a monthly basis. And some of them, again, they talked about having that emergency savings, which they never had in the past, but it made them feel a lot more secure And, you know, they actually built some confidence in themselves. And again, some of them going through the program, and again, it was initially started because of that incentive, but because they did it for 6 months, it kind of proved to themselves that, hey, I can do this on a regular basis. And I kind of like the fact that I could make a commitment. So moving forward, again, we'd like to continue outreach to ALICE communities for all services offered by the Hawaii Homeownership Center. Even during these challenging times, again, homeownership still can be attainable for ALICE families. We are looking to partner more with nonprofits and collaborate entities to provide outreach opportunities and funding support, as well as to improve efficiencies for the next financial capabilities pilot program so that we can be scalable. And our contact information is on this slide here. And if we have any questions, we will stick around and answer them.
Thank you so much, Raina and Dale, and thank you to all of our presenters here today, and thank you again to all of our attendees. Right now, we want to go ahead and let folks know that we are at 3:30, so for those that have limited time constraints, we thank you very much for being here and invite you to please visit us online at the ALICE registration page. You'll be able to see a copy of this presentation in full available starting tomorrow, and you can share with people as well. Also, to let you know that you will be receiving an email post-event that will have a link to a survey. We would like to get your feedback on what kinds of events, what kinds of input, what kinds of ideas, and what kind of opportunities that you have to get involved with the work in your individual capacity. Even if you don't necessarily know what that might be or what it looks like yet, please let us know. And we are putting together some subcommittee work to work on this going forward. So with that said, I want to invite anyone at this time who has not yet, please drop any questions in the chat. And again, for those who would like to stay, please feel welcome to. We'll go ahead and spend about 8 more minutes answering some questions that have come up. So panelists, I invite you to go ahead and turn your cameras back on. One of the questions that we did receive, and again, for those who are having more questions, feel free to enter it now. We did have a question though about the acronym ALICE and the letter E standing for employed. And the question is, due to the huge increase in unemployment, would the number of ALICE families decrease? Meaning, would they if they're no longer employed, are they still ALICE? The answer to that, while yes, it would sound kind of alluring that we would have a lower ALICE population, the reality is for those who lose all employment options and had less income below the threshold, that would actually be the unfortunate consequence of dipping back down into poverty. And of course, there are opportunities and subsidies that are available to those that are living below that poverty line that do not exist to those that are in the ALICE population. However, it's certainly not the kind of economic situation that we want to see people in. So in other words, we do often consolidate both ALICE and people living below ALICE into that number that you've seen. Next question, and this is to the panel at large. What kind of strategies have you determined to be most successful in generating interest for supporting ALICE? And anyone who wants to unmute, feel free to go first. Again, what kind of strategies have you determined to be most successful in generating interest to support ALICE?
I think for us, this is Honolulu Habitat. For us, it's participation in our mission. One of the really nice things about the work that we do is all of the volunteers that come out are working alongside the families that are going to be living in the house, and so they're getting the opportunity to see each other and meet each other on even ground, and so recognizing that. You know, it's a very large percentage of the population that is ALICE, and they are our neighbors, they are our friends, they are our coworkers in many cases. So,
thanks, Chen. Anyone else want to jump into that question?
can say one thing. This is Reina with the Hawaii Homeownership Center. I think just to echo what Jim said, that as we speak more about ALICE, and I think that acronym is more widely understood, and it's also an opportunity to educate folks. I think for a lot of employers, their employees are often in the ALICE category. Our neighbors, a good number of all of our personal circles are ALICE. So I think that kind of educating what that means in terms of who ALICE is, I think generates some interest in the work that we're doing.
Great, thank you. We do have a question actually, Jim, for you, for Habitat for Humanity. A question about volunteers, and do they need to have trade skills, or can they be interested in labor and learn on site?
They can be skilled, unskilled. They may think they have skills, but they don't. That's perfectly fine. I mean, part of what we do is we teach skill. We love it when people come out and learn something new, whether it's something as simple as learning how to use a screw gun. Yeah, it's great when the folks from Nordic PCL come out and show us how to build. That's fantastic. But the real beauty is anybody that walks onto the build site, we're teaching the skill and keeping them safe.
Thank you. And for anyone else who's interested in volunteering, you can enter your information into the survey that will be coming to you via email, as well as in the chat right now. Put your information in there and we'll connect you to our panelists, as well as to other nonprofits in the community if you have an interest in volunteering. Question about the impact of extended unemployment benefits and supplemental unemployment benefits. Now that the per child payments are occurring, does anyone, and this may be a question for Beth, do you have any data on how those unemployment benefits and the supplemental unemployment benefits and per child payments have helped, or do you have any information on how that has impacted households?
I'm afraid I don't have any information on that, but I do know that this is expected to have a very great positive effect on childhood poverty, which of course has such lasting effects for the lifetime of a child and a family. I have not been studying that, and I'm sure that we will be taking a look at it as it starts coming in.
Thank you. And just a note for everybody, for the next event in our series, it will be talking about policy and legislative innovation, and of course the child tax credit being one of those policies that we expect to have a significant effect on the community. If anyone else wants to speak up, feel free. Otherwise, another question. For Habitat and the Homeownership Center, what county and/or state level laws and policies are you advocating for to increase access to low-cost housing for Alice and below?
I can go first. As I mentioned earlier, affordable housing is a very broad range topic, and so while we don't rent housing, there being more funds out there for affordable rentals to be developed is important to us. For there to be more funds out there to advocate for homelessness services is very important to us, because there's a connection between all of these folks. And so really anybody that is assisting Connie Mitchell at IHS or other agencies that are doing their work will advocate on that on their behalf to create more affordable rentals, because ultimately you're creating people who get into something they can afford, improve their life, improve their families' lives, and maybe they'll be at a point someday to want to approach Habitat. So we also, there were some funds that we advocated for that are going into a state-supported CDFI, that are pools of funds that we can access to pay for the construction of homes going forward.
Thank you. Raina or Dale, anything to add?
I think Jim also, we echo what Jim has talked about. We do acknowledge that there's a continuum of housing, that while we focus on homeownership, that there needs to be support for the housing ladder. I don't have any specific legislation to speak of right now in terms of what we're trying to move in terms of an agenda, but like Jim talked about, the revolving homeownership fund was something that I think was a positive move in terms of making that available. And so there's some other topics on the table that we're in discussion with, whether it's the individual housing account program and how to make that doable or something that can be more widely available. So just because it's on the books in terms of legislation, how can it make it so it's actually accessible to people in the community as well? Thanks.
And again, for those who have joined us and need to leave at this time, we did put the link to the survey in the chat. Please go ahead and click and to share not only your feedback, but ideas, information that you would like to contribute to participate. With that, we do have another question here. Would a dramatic increase in the supply of affordable housing, both affordable rentals and home ownership, significantly decrease the ALIS rate? And would allowing residential development on ag lands do this? I'll give people a chance to think about that. I could answer partially from the ALIS perspective on that. ALIS households, largely housing is the #1 expense in the survival budget for most families, followed very closely behind by childcare. So very simply, yes, the answer would be yes to both affordable rentals as well as affordable home ownership. But I do want to turn it over to others as well for perspective on that.
Okay, well, I would say, you know, I don't know that we're ever going to have supply beyond demand in affordable housing here. So I think there are great conversations to have about, you know, ag land and how to use that for, you know, for affordable rental or ownership. For folks who are working on ag land. There are great conversations about teacher housing and things like that. So I think if we got creative and we got together to be creative and worked as a group to talk about affordable housing as opposed to everybody sort of staying in their silos, then I think we could come up with some solutions. I don't think we will ever get to the point where we're like, we've got too much housing and not enough, we've got too much affordable housing and not enough people to put in that. We can all envision that day and it's a lovely thing to think about, but you know, I don't know that we're going to get there, but we can make some massive improvements.
Anyone else want to add thoughts?
Hi, Lisa, this is Gail. You know, a lot of the counties are working towards providing affordable rentals. And I know sometimes, you know, the public in general, when you hear affordable rental, that's not what I'm looking at. And sometimes it's a mindset change to how you view the benefits of affordable rental. Affordable rentals can lower your housing expense, and it affords you an opportunity to save that difference towards working towards building up a down payment, building up some reserves so you can pay down the debt. So it's just a matter of utilizing those opportunities with a plan down the road. And oftentimes, again, it's changing the mindset of the public for some of these opportunities available.
Terrific. And I just wanted to add too that one of the major focus areas for our ALIS impact areas is affordable housing. And so for those that are interested in this area, which I know there's a wide interest in many different perspectives, again, please submit your information via the link that's in the chat as well as coming to your email. And we'll collect that and engage you right in the opportunities to work on housing, among many other things. With that said, we're just right now about 15 minutes over time. So if your question was not answered, we will have information afterwards so that we can connect you directly to our panelists. Feel free to email us at impact@auw.org, or go ahead and leave a comment or a question inside the survey. Again, the link in the chat. And with that said, we wanted to invite you to attend the next in our ALIS series. We have August 26th, we'll be having our next event, and we'll share a little teaser with you right now. And hopefully they got you excited about our next event in the series. We want to thank you once again for being here. Thank you for your interest in this subject. It is something that we all need to come together for. And again, we really desire your feedback, so please don't hesitate. We'll also connect you with our panelists afterwards for any other questions. On behalf of our panelists today, as well as Aloha United Way, I want to thank you for coming, and we look forward to connecting with you again. Aloha.
Thank you.